Pixel art tips that every artist should know. I recently created a small fishing game with my friend Atsu for the Playdate, which if you haven't heard of is a miniature console that's like the Game Boy but has a crank to it. Anywho, considering Atsu is like the #1 game dev specialist on the Playdate, I thought it'd be fun if he programmed it and I could just tackle the artwork. And while working on said artwork, I was reminded of some crucial tips that I think every artist should know. And tip #1 is never have form over function. When Atsu and I first talked about the game, we thought it'd be cool to try to add a first-person perspective of the water and the fishing rod. But after quickly mocking it up, we realized it would be extremely difficult to implement, and it kind of took away from the whole fishing experience. It's so important in pixel art or art in general to think about how the end product will function. If your artwork is making that too difficult to program, or it just kind of ruins the game feel, it doesn't matter how pretty the artwork is if it doesn't work well with the game. Tip #2 is stylized art ages much better. A pretty obvious example of this is comparing the cel-shaded graphics in Wind Waker compared to a Call of Duty game at that time. One of the hardest parts about making realistic artwork is it really doesn't age at all, so that's why you should try to apply some sort of style to it. And this is something I had to keep in mind when it came to our fishing game. When I first tried creating it, I actually based it off of realistic sketches and tried scaling them down. So I tried creating these photorealistic fish, but they ended up just looking bad. And that's when I realized it was probably better to try a more stylistic approach. I ended up basing it off of kind of the Nintendo DS era with the exaggerated geometric fish and the thick outlines. So if you want to make your game more timeless, maybe think about stylizing your art. Now tip #3 is you don't need a lot of colors. Now one of the requirements for the Playdate is you can only use bitmap artwork, which is only 2 colors, black and transparent. And at first you may think that's a bad thing, but actually it's a lot easier to make your game look consistent if you have less colors or doing a monochromatic palette. A really great example of this is black and white films. Modern movies have to do all this crazy color correction to make sure that everything looks consistent from shot to shot, but black and white movies don't have to worry about that because they're all the same color. I'm a huge fan of using color, but it can be really tricky to work with, so if you're new or you're nervous, make sure to start with the basics, and black and white is a classic. #4 should be a tip that everyone is familiar with, and if you're not, you need to be. And that's always look at reference. How can you make pixel art for a fish if you don't even know what a fish looks like? I literally use reference for every single one of these sprites, and if I didn't, I don't even want to know what they would have looked like. And when I mean looking at reference, I mean real images of fish. Don't look at other pixel art of fish because you're going to get inspired by that and you're going to try to steal it. #5 is organize your artwork. Layers are your friend. It's really important that if you're using software that has layers, that you're actually naming them properly and so you don't confuse yourself. Artists kind of have a stereotype for being unorganized, but the more organized that you are, the faster you're going to produce artwork and the easier it's going to be when you reference it back in the future. And speaking of staying organized, I've actually been using this software called Milanote to organize all my games and projects, and I've been super lucky enough to have them sponsor today's video. It brings me so much joy to talk about something that I actually use on a daily basis. For those who don't know what Milanote is, it's basically a visual organization tool where you can take notes, add checklists, drag in images or links from the internet, and you can throw them all together. But what I personally love about it is you can have boards inside of boards. That way you don't have like 50,000 notes in one big area, which is one of my biggest issues with other products. Also, you can collaborate with your team, which has been so useful for me. Basically, I can drag in reference for a location for my game, and my team will actually see the updates in real time. They also have these super handy templates if you don't want to design any boards for yourself, or if you're intimidated by starting with a blank canvas. I seriously can't say enough good things about it. I use it every single day, and if you want, you can make a free account and give it a shot and let me know what you think. #6 is consistency comes from practice. Consistency is probably one of the biggest giveaways if your artwork looks amateur or not. Normally this happens when people watch a couple of those how to make a tree or house sorts of tutorials from a bunch of different artists. Those tutorials can be incredibly helpful, but the problem is that they're not consistent with each other. I was actually struggling with the same issue when I was creating the fish for the game. Each one felt a little bit different from the previous just style-wise, and a part of that reason was I didn't fully define what that style was. And the rules that I did have, I kept breaking. So the only way to stay consistent is making up rules, like keeping all your artwork in black and white. Or in my case, all the outlines were 2 pixel wide with all the detail inside being a single pixel. So if you're concerned your art's a little inconsistent, all it takes is just practice.
Hey, Goodgis, what about receiving constructive feedback?
That's a great question, and it's tip #7 is don't take feedback too personally. Feedback is one of the hardest parts about making art. And if you want to make a living off of being an artist, then it's important that you learn to not take it too personally. personally. When someone, especially a client, doesn't like something about your piece, it's not a personal attack on you. This is something I used to struggle with all the time when I first started, and I notice a lot of young artists do it as well. You have to disconnect from your art and realize that if people think something is weird or off about it, that's probably because they're onto something. Of course, people can be rude or just give you bad opinions, and just filter that out. But my main point is if someone has feedback about your art, just be accepting, learn from it, eat the meat, spit out the bones. If you have any questions or other tips that you think that every artist should know, please let me know in the comments down below.
Hey guys, Atsu here. If you want to see how our game By the Pier turned out, you can watch the devlog over on my channel.
Yes, please do. Atsu literally did everything. All I did was make some cute fish, and that's only if you consider a sock a cute fish. Also, a quick shout out to Milanote for being such an awesome sponsor, and also Electron PR, Flower, Heath Sargent, James Albert, Luke the Duke, Remtane, Rybread, and Skides, and the rest of the fantastic Patreon supporters. Love you guys. Keep it classy. That's it for me. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out.